Welcome everyone to Legally Speaking. I'm Sonia Brown.
And I'm Kenya Johnson. Legally Speaking is sponsored by the Georgia Association of Black Women Attorneys, GABWA.
GABWA is a voluntary bar association who seeks to advocate for women and children and empower our communities. Remember, this show is not intended to give legal advice, so if you have a legal issue or concern, it's very important for you to consult an attorney.
Today's show will be discussing the commercial sexual exploitation of children, otherwise known as CSEC, and its impact on our youth and our communities.
Our guests today know all too well the devastating effects of the commercial sexual exploitation of children. So when we come back, we'll talk to two people who are leading the charge against CSEC.
There's more to come on Legally Speaking. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Legally Speaking. I'm Sonia Brown. Today's show is about the commercial sexual exploitation of children, also known as CSEC. Our guests today are Senator Renee Unterman and Janice Barocas of the Barocas Group. Ladies, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for being here. This is a very important topic that I want to get into, but first I want to start by you telling us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a state senator from Gwinnett County, and I've been an elected official for over 20 years, and I serve as chairman of the Senate Health and Human Services Committee.
Wonderful. Janice?
I'm the principal of a small government relations firm, the Barocas Group, and have been representing nonprofit contract clients in the Georgia General Assembly before the committees that work with appropriations and pass legislation.
Excellent. With such diverse backgrounds and the work that you do, how did you get involved in this issue? But actually, before we start, let me back up. What is the commercial sexual exploitation of children?
Well, I think it's the when you take someone and do something against their will. To put it in layman's term, it's defined in the Georgia Code exactly what is exploitation, but it's forcing someone to do something that they don't want to do.
Okay. And how did you get involved in this specific issue that involves children and sexual exploitation?
I was actually at the Capitol, and I had a minister from downtown, and I represent a suburban area, and the minister came to me and said, "Senator, do you know what is happening on the streets of Atlanta?" And I said, "Well, of course I do. I'm at the Capitol every day." But in reality, I really did not know what was going on with children in general. And I said to myself, of all things I do at the Capitol, and I write great laws, I do great things, but I really did not understand what was happening to children. And I said, what could I do that would be more important, even in writing appropriations in the budget? What could be more important than taking care of Georgia's children?
Excellent, excellent. And Janice, how did you get involved in this issue?
In 2006, 2007, I had several clients approach me with a conversation about the fact that kids were being bought and sold for sex in Georgia. And they had serious concerns, and they wanted to bring our lawmakers into the conversation. They wanted to sort of get out in front of the issue instead of always dealing with victims' issues. They really wanted to make, a statement that this is not acceptable in our state, and to partner with lawmakers in stopping the sex trafficking of children in Georgia.
How big of an issue is this in Georgia? I've read statistics, seen the headlines that Atlanta is a huge hub for CSEC. How big of an issue?
Unfortunately, Atlanta is right up there with Miami, Las Vegas, New York. We're in the top 14. We're identified by the FBI that we're one of the largest cities. And it's not just Atlanta, it's Columbus, Macon, Savannah. It's any place you have the mobility of people and there's a demand for sex. And unfortunately, that's in our whole world. But specifically, Atlanta is targeted because of our convention and visitors.
Okay. And when we're talking about children, What ages are we talking about that you're seeing children being exploited?
Unfortunately, when this first started out, I thought we would be talking about children that are 16, 17, you know, young girls gone wild. But unfortunately, you know, we get cases 10 years old, and to me, that's the tragic part of it. And year by year, the age goes down. It's not going up. There's a demand for younger and younger girls, and it's not just girls, it's boys also.
So we're dealing, like you said, as young as 10 years old, and I think that's hard for a viewing audience to even fathom, but that's what's going on here in Atlanta and across the nation, unfortunately. What are we doing here in Georgia? I know there have been several bills over the past few years that you, Senator, have supported, and Janice, you have lobbied for on behalf of a lot of the organizations. Can you tell us about some of those bills and what those bills entail?
Well, when we first started out, I was told not to talk about sex on the Senate floor, that it was a topic that you just didn't talk about. And then you start talking about men having sex with young children, and that just, you know, really blew the place apart. And when we first started out, usually it takes me about 3 months to get a study committee, and it took me a full year to get a study committee on this topic. And from that study committee, we have progressed. We have educated legislators across the whole state. We have identified the problem. They have bought into the situation. They understand what the situation is. And we have, in the past few years, passed many bills, I guess about 5 bills that revolve around this topic. So we have actually put into law, and the other thing we've done, and Janice has been critical in this, is a system of care, developing a system of care, because it does no good to identify these children if you don't have anything to do with them and give them therapeutic services.
Okay, excellent. I want to talk about the system of care. Janice, I know that the governor's task force, or the governor's office on children and families, has a task force that deals specifically with CSEC. Tell us about that task force and how the system of care works within that task force.
The task force has 4 work groups, and it's sort of modeled on the federal anti-trafficking in persons report. We look at prevention. That's the first work group. Primarily folks who work in children and youth therapeutic services. Kind of gather around that table. It is chaired by master's in social work level folks who have worked directly with victims of CSEC. And then the protection work group is essentially folks who are, in many cases, running agencies, nonprofit agencies, that house and protect children who've been victims. And Dale Alton, the executive director of the Georgia Care Connection, is one of the co-chairs. Prosecution is the committee that I co-chair with Kathy McCullough and Special Agent John Whitaker from the GBI, who runs the Human Trafficking Task Force. And then we've got a 4th evaluation committee to make sure our performance goals are all on track and being achieved.
And what's the task force goal?
Each work group runs sort of subject matter goals around their own issues. The prosecution work group, for example, really tries to increase the investigation of this type of crime, people who are buying and selling children for sex in Georgia. And we want to see every investigation be a child-centered investigation, because too often the case is built on the child's testimony alone, which is really traumatic for the children who've been through the ordeal to have to retell it then in the criminal justice context.
And I understand that, being a prosecutor, that you don't want to re-victimize the victim, especially if you're talking about really young people in this case. I want to talk specifically about HB 200, the bill, the anti-trafficking bill that GABWA supported, one of the supporters that was passed in 2011. What does that bill entail? What does it do?
Well, it increased the penalties for felony convictions so that you put the perpetrator in jail. It also gave rights to be able to take away their possessions, just like on drug cases. It treats the victim as a victim and not as a criminal. And before then, a child that was picked up, they were considered a criminal because they were being prostituted, and they were prostitutes. So it kind of changes the whole dynamic in the state of Georgia. It's a very historic bill. It could not have been passed without GABWA's support and many other people's support, but we are very, very appreciative as legislators that y'all stepped up to the plate.
And it's good to see the work that you're doing, Janice, and GABWA has an opportunity to work with you and the work that you're doing, because this is a very important topic. I also want to talk about the age, you said something very interesting just now. You said being prostituted. We always think that this is a choice that someone is making. But if
Right.
we're talking about 9 and 10-year-olds. Janice, talk to me about the age of consent and what it means to be prostituted as opposed to choosing to be a prostitute.
In Georgia, the age of consent for sex is 16. And so a child 14, 15 years old or younger has been a victim of a crime in the context if sexual molestation is what is charged. But if money changed hands or something of value essentially was a part of the commerce of selling that child for sex against their will, it suddenly becomes prostitution. And our code section in the law was written at a time when no one ever dreamed that we would see children, very young children, being literally put out into the marketplace online and on the actual streets for sale for sex. So the laws haven't really caught up with some of the current events. And sadly, that makes this a crime that's very easy to hide in plain view if you're an exploiter. Because if you do find that you come on radar's attention with law enforcement, the child's likely to get arrested and not necessarily the person behind the curtain who's manipulating the situation.
Do we know how many children we're talking about in Georgia?
When we first did a study several years ago, it was estimated over 400 children per month were exploited in Georgia. And one of the things that is critical that Janice is talking about, the intent of the law is coercion, forcing someone to do something against their will. And that's why House Bill 200 was so significant.
And you guys are doing excellent work, and I think we've just touched the tip of the iceberg and would love to have you back so we can continue this conversation. I think it's something that we as GABWA, we as legislators, we as attorneys and lobbyists, we as a community need to talk about. So if you could just tell our viewing audience just something that you want them to know to take away from this, or maybe how they can assist. What is it something that our viewing audience needs to hear?
I think the most important thing this past session, we passed a bill called mandatory reporting. And if you watch TV or you read anything in the newspaper about the Sandusky incident at the University of Pennsylvania, you know that it's very important when you see a child that's being exploited in any manner or abused in any manner to turn it over to the authorities, whether it's DFACS, your local police, your local elected official, just to let someone know that a child is being in harm's way.
Excellent. And Janice, what would you like to leave our viewing audience with?
A lot of folks watching today are probably mandatory reporters of child sexual abuse in the context as a teacher or as a clergy member, and it is a mandatory report to law enforcement and to DFACS since 2009 if you suspect that a child is being commercially sexually exploited, even if it's not by a parent or a caretaker. And so that's a piece of information I think that empowers folks who do serve and protect children. If they know what you've seen, they can act on it, they can investigate it.
Excellent. Well, again, Senator Unterman, Janice Barocas, thank you for being here with us today, and we definitely want to continue this conversation.
Thank you.
Get more in depth with it.
Thank you.
When we come back to Legally Speaking, we'll hear more about the commercial sexual exploitation of children. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Legally Speaking. I'm Kenya Johnson. On today's show, we've been discussing the commercial sexual exploitation of children, CSEC. Before the break, we were joined by Senator Renee Unterman and a lobbyist from the Georgia CSEC Task Force. Now we're joined by Jennifer Swain of A Future Not a Past and Keisha Head, a CSEC survivor and advocate. Jennifer, Keisha, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Jennifer, please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to advocate against the sexual exploitation of young women.
I'm an Alabama native, but I've been living in Georgia since 2008, and I've been working on the issue since 2008. I'm the campaign director for A Future Not a Past, and I was just like most of the people in the population, uneducated. And when I found out that CSEC was a problem and it was happening to girls that could have been me, I wanted to become an advocate and I wanted to do whatever I could. And I've been here, still working.
And Keisha, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a mother of 3, and I'm also a survivor of commercial sexual exploitation. And in 2010, I just decided that I could not remain silent and that I must speak and become a voice for the girls who are going through this horrific crime.
We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Jennifer, please tell us a little bit about youthSpark and A Future Not a Past.
Well, youthSpark is a nonprofit organization, and we're based inside of the Fulton County Juvenile Courthouse. Formerly the Juvenile Justice Fund, and we're going through some transition, but we are looking to end child sex trafficking through 2 initiatives, the A Future Not a Past campaign and our first CSEC prevention program, the Voices Project. We really truly look at the issue as supply and demand. And through our A Future Not a Past campaign, we seek to do research, training, and advocacy, and to stop the demand for prostituted children. We recently launched the Georgia Demand Study that showed 7,200 men purchase sex from adolescent girls here in Georgia.
Could you repeat that statistic?
7,200 men, knowingly or unknowingly, purchase sex from adolescent girls each month here in Georgia.
Goodness. Well, Keisha, can you tell us how you advocate on behalf of CSEC victims?
On behalf, I use my own personal story to just raise awareness, and I also advocate and support legislation that helps protect children against predators and the people who purchase them as well. And I just use my voice to be with the girls and boys.
And your voice will definitely be the most effective way to get the message across. What would you like to tell young ladies that are being victimized by this illegal trade?
I would like to tell any young lady or boy, because it does happen to boys as well, that you're not alone, that there is help, there are resources that can help you, because oftentimes you feel that you're stuck in that lifestyle and there's no help or no one that understands, and there is.
Jennifer, who are the victims that are being exploited, and where is this exploitation occurring?
Well, I think through the research that now comes out of the Governor's Office for Children and Families, we say a conservative number between 200 and 400 girls are commercially sexually exploited each month. We love to say that a victim doesn't look like any certain person or any certain time. This is a crime that happens in every community, and it looks different for every single community. But while the victims are what grab our hearts, the victims are what get us up in the morning and we fight for this, we have to begin looking at demand. And if we truly want to stop the prostitution of children, we can't just say victims. We have to stop the demand. And that's what A Future Not a Past is focusing on right now. How can we disable that, and how can we stop it so that no other children will become victims?
So without the demand, then the trade can lessen.
Yes, because this is a very lucrative business. And just like any law, outside of drugs and guns, selling children for sex is the 3rd largest money-making business here in our country. So if we use the basic laws of economics with that, if you take away the supply, the demand, and take away the demand, the supply will go down. And so we're really pushing for people to not just let the victims break your heart, not just hear the stories of the young victims and see their faces, but we have to get upset and angry at the men who seemingly go unnoticed.
The statistics and the issue, we're so glad that this is on the forefront because it's extremely disturbing. Can you tell us, what are some of the warning signs for parents, teachers to look for that a child may be exploited?
Well, we really say that the first thing that you really have to do is to look. Most people look past certain things and you look past them, but I'll allow Keisha to kind of give you some of the warning paths, but we really urge parents and teachers to really pay attention and look.
With the Voices Project, which is a group that is a preventive to commercial sexual exploitation, we look for warning signs like truancy, a girl who is missing school, inappropriate sexual relationships with adult males, the girl who you just look for the girl that, to me, I think that any girl could be a victim. I really don't think that this has a look. I think that any girl that has a Facebook account or anywhere that somebody could reach out to her could be a victim.
Well, Keisha, you have a very compelling and uplifting story. How did you escape this exploitation?
It was very difficult for me to get out of that lifestyle because at the time there were not any resources available. But one of the things is unfortunate that it happened to me, but it's very unfortunate that it continues to happen to young girls today in this society where we have the resources to protect them. We have the advocates who stand up for these girls. So I think that I want to just say that we have